America actually started as a libertarian country. The separation occurred between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, two titanic figures of the time, whose ideas were to become the Republican and Democratic parties. These gentlemen wielded enormous influence over the ideals of a very young nation and polarized it. It's been that way ever since. Skip forward to modern times. You go vote. You think one side or the other. The third party, the libertarians, are generally considered radicals to be avoided. Interesting. The Declaration of Independence was a very radical thing. The men that signed it were committing high treason. I mean, these men were fucking radical. The libertarians essentially concentrate their attention on keeping your liberties. It was true 200 years ago, and it's basically true now. Unfortunately, that mindset is forsaken. In other countries, namely any European nation, it isn't common to have 5 or 6 parties elected to government. There is, of course, the obligatory figurehead, usually a prime minister. This might seem like it would cause a mess, but believe it or not, the actions of these governments are usually quite eloquent. Modern democratic socialism has evolved, and that's a good thing. Democratic socialism is the preferred government in many modern nations around the world. Let us look quickly at a few things that makes the U.S. different. First, geographical location. This alone was for many years what made the U.S. a relatively safe and peaceful country. The probability of a direct attack was simply not there. In 1941, with the Pearl Harbor attack, this changed. It is a modern world. With airplanes and advanced naval forces, the U.S. is now vulnerable. With this vulnerability comes defense. The U.S. has amassed what is arguably the most advanced defense system on the planet. Of course, we begin aloof. It is also the most sophisticated offensive force the world has ever seen. This geographical separation has been null and void for some time now, which moves us to another thing that separates the U.S. from everyone else. Money. The U.S. has dominated the global economy for over half a century, beginning with the U.S.'s involvement in World War II. Defense spending is the main benefactor of this domination. Until recently, the U.S. dollar buying power was almost obscene, possessing the ability to almost humiliate foreign services and goods providers. This alone contributed to the recent landslide in the domestic U.S. economy. Outsource became totally paramount to maintain the technological advances achieved by the U.S., making it necessary to concentrate a whole generation into that particular field. After the tech bubble burst in 1999, that generation was left without skills and without jobs. All of the money being poured overseas began to accumulate and has, in effect, strengthened the world economy. The euro has taken over as the most powerful currency in the world and continues to grow, with much patriotic resistance in the U.S. This economic separation has been terminated, which brings us to another strength the U.S. has relied upon: unity. Because of the political structure of the U.S., the two-party system, people have inherently fallen into one of two categories, either with or without support, with the majority ruling. When the majority rules, an incredible amount of power is placed in the hands of a few, with no one really questioning the implications of having a majority at all. In this system, a general agreement is not necessarily required. Even in the case that one side disagrees with the other, the president holding veto power short of a 2/3 majority, a decision can be made by one person, getting only half support in Congress and Senate, and become policy. Look back for a moment at the lead-up to the war in Iraq. One man made this initiative with the backing of his cabinet members, and it became so, ignoring the international community and therefore becoming self-appointed leaders and dealers of justice. The main problem with this is that because the House is so deeply divided on just two sides, it isn't hard to force a bill through, with the given mindset that if you are a Republican, you vote okay for what the Republican president proposes, rarely giving second thought to the needs of the citizens, instead being put into different words, in the interests of the nation. Alienating the people in this process. It may very well be in the best interests of the nation as a whole, if you take the perspective of the government being a separate entity, like a corporation. Everyone knows that no one person can affect the health of a corporation, all actions partaken by a corporation being in the best interests of the corporation itself, not its employees, whilst trying to convince you otherwise. But just lay out a few days for no apparent reason and see who comes first. Within companies of this nature, many of you are all too familiar with the one-sidedness of goals. The government is not dissimilar in this respect. Think of the IRS as being Human Resources Department and the President being the CEO. Whether or not the employees of this corporation realize this, they are feeding it. It is not feeding them. Another major problem with this is that when the government begins to fail, there is no escape, save bailing completely out and starting over. There are no bankruptcy proceedings to erase debt. The damage is done. Out of desperation, the majority side begins backing away from the policies of its CEO, which we're seeing today, in an attempt to reshape the general opinion of itself. It probably won't work, but what you will have left is the same two-party system that created this monster. Ideally, a multi-party system relies on a 2/3 majority, with the Prime Minister's position being one of diplomacy, not policy-making. this is another subject entirely. I would like you to question what you are. Is it really necessary to be part of one party or the other? Do you view yourself as an individual, or as a cog in the wheels of politics and economics in the name of a nation as a whole? It is necessary in these modern times to decide whether you would like to speak on behalf of humanity or on behalf of your nation. Mutual cooperation is possible, for it is happening all around us, but not within our walls. The earth is our house, unified before it crumbles from within because of one antagonist or problem. The European Union is now an extremely powerful force, whether you choose to recognize that or not. The U.S. must join the trend towards global unity, and embrace that unity by practicing it from within first. The rest of the world needs us. Remember, a house divided against itself cannot stand.